All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Don Mitchell. I am one of the vergers here at the Cathedral, and I'm also the head Thurifer. Today we're going to talk about all that smoke that you see in a lot of churches. Some places don't like it, some places love it, some places use it sometimes, some places use it all the time. It just depends on local custom, right? Some of the things that I want to talk about today are the historical use of incense, why we use it, and some practical uses of incense. The practicality of it is kind of no longer a thing, but it certainly used to be. Incense is actually part of three main sacrifices: our sacrifice of praise, our sacrifice of blood, sacrifice of incense. What is the symbolism? What are the rules for using incense? Hint, there aren't that many. Being a Thurifer, what does it mean to be a Thurifer? Who can be a Thurifer? Why would you want to be a Thurifer? And we'll talk about when and how to swing the incense. And before I start talking at you for the next however long, I want to play this video here that I found online when I was doing some research, and it really, you're going to hear me say a lot of the same things, but I wanted to play this from another perspective, from another church's perspective.
Incense is mentioned over 150 times in the scriptures, whether in reference to worship practices or in reference to eternity. We're going to talk a little bit about incense today, because regardless of how you feel about incense being burned in church, according to the scriptures, you're going to smell a lot of it in heaven. Eastern Orthodox Christians use a lot of incense. Now, I'm not trying to single us out as the only ones that do this. Even other Christians that use incense will point out that Orthodox really like it. At many points in our services, the priest or the deacon will move around the church, swinging this censer, not haphazardly, there is an order and method to it, and this will release a smell of beautiful, fragrant incense. Inside this censer is burning hot charcoal, and on top of this charcoal is placed incense. Traditional Christianity and Orthodoxy today seeks to engage every single one of our senses in the worship of God. And incense is how it engages the sense of smell, and it is the one most closely associated with memory. So just as the smell of a delicious food might remind you of a beautiful moment in your childhood, so the smell of incense for a Christian reminds them instantly of church. In that one smell, they remember Christmas, Easter, every single Sunday they've ever been to church, every little service. It places them straight back in there. An Orthodox Christian can walk into any Orthodox church on earth, instantly have their senses engaged in the same way, and instantly remember that they are in the house of God. Incense represents our worship, our prayers, and the grace of the Holy Spirit. It is a smell that permeates us and stays with us even as we leave the service. But all of that is to say what incense does. This isn't saying why we use it. It can be said that in Old Testament times there were three basic forms of sacrifice: sacrifice of praise, sacrifice of incense, and sacrifice of blood. All three forms of sacrifice continued to exist and can be said to continue to exist in the Christian church to this day. Now, sacrifice of praise is an easy one to see. This is the sacrificing of time, the sacrificing of a Sunday, the sacrifice of time to worship God. It is the sacrifice of praise. Sacrifice of blood has continued in the full completion of the bloodless sacrifice of the Holy Eucharist, the body and blood of Jesus Christ in Holy Communion. This leaves the sacrifice of incense, which is just incense once again. It has continued since the Old Testament times. Jewish people throughout the Old Testament used incense as instructed by God. The first recorded description of incense being offered to Jesus Christ happens in the 1st century, in Matthew chapter 2. Here, the three kings come to Jesus bearing gifts. One of them is frankincense. Now, each of these three gifts has a specific reason for being there, both prophetic and explanatory of who Jesus is. Frankincense is used by priests, and Jesus is the high priest. But each of these gifts is also given to someone. Frankincense is given to God, and Jesus is God incarnate. Actually, all three gifts of the wise men tend to be present in the incense in Orthodox churches. The censer tends to be either gold-plated or painted gold, and the incense that is burnt is a mix, generally speaking, of frankincense and myrrh. Incense is still offered to Christ by wise men around the world. Now this is actually prophesied in the Old Testament centuries before Christianity has come on the scene. In the book of Malachi, he quotes God as saying that my name shall be great among the Gentiles. In every place incense shall be offered to my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the nations. This straightforward prophecy has come true. Incense is being offered to God everywhere. Apart from the presence of the gifts of the Magi in the censers in most Orthodox churches, there are other forms of symbolism that will vary from church to church between East and West. But there are a few often recurring ones. So, for instance, the censer tends to have 4 chains for the 4 Gospels. Sometimes it will be 3 for the Holy Trinity. On the censer, there are 12 bells for the 12 apostles. But the bells have another significance, and that is, in the Old Testament, the robes of the priest also had small bells attached to them, so that when they were behind the curtain in the Holy of Holies, the people could still hear them moving around, with the little bells making a slight noise. They would know that the priest was okay. Bells, and the sound of these small bells can still be heard to this day in places of worship of God. The base of the censer is said to be representing the church, because from the church, the incense rises up to heaven as our prayers rise up to heaven. Zechariah's use of incense in the Gospels shows that it was familiar to Christians of that first century. 2 references to incense in John's book of Revelation seem to imply an early Christian use and familiarity with incense. The incense in these cases is also closely linked with heaven and eternity, showing the presence of the beautiful fragrances of incense in paradise. 3 of the oldest Christian liturgies make many references to incense. The Liturgy of St. James, which many scholars date back to the 1st century, contains 10 references to the burning of incense through the service. Incense is also mentioned in the Liturgy of St. Mark and the Liturgy of the Blessed Apostles, dating back to the 2nd or 3rd centuries. The text of the Apostolic Canon also references the Christian use of incense. Eusebius in the 3rd century references the Christian use of incense. And at the start of the 4th century, incense is casually mentioned as being present in a Christian funeral. Note that every single one of these mentions predates the formation of the New Testament canon in the 4th century and its wide establishment in Christianity by the 5th century, because Christians have been burning incense unto God longer than they have had a Bible to read. There are several other mentions of incense in the early days of the church, and at first glance some of these seem negative. But when you look closer at them, the negativity isn't to incense itself, but to the burning of incense unto pagan idols, and this is idolatry, and Christians rightly stood against that. This wasn't a problem with incense itself or the burning of incense, because God instituted the use of incense, as we can see in the scriptures. Christianity didn't suddenly come up with it. We have been burning incense since the days of the Old Testament. For me, the story of the Magi giving incense to the baby Jesus is a wonderful reason for why we continue to do so today. It is nice to know that these gifts are still being offered to our Saviour. King David says in the Psalms that my prayer arise before you as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. This is one of the most repeated verses in Orthodox church services when we offer incense to God. And this image is continued in the book of Revelation in a powerful way, that the incense, the prayers of the saints rise before the throne of God. It is a powerful image. There will be incense in heaven, a lot of it. But our journey into heaven has already begun. We are on that journey now, because heaven begins here, in the church, in our relationship with Christ, on earth. Thank you for watching our introduction to incense. We were very excited for that episode. There's obviously a lot more that can be said about incense, the traditions of incense, the designs of the censers, and all of the things that go around it. But this is our short introduction. Thank you.
Okay. So that's he just did my whole presentation for me. So. No, I wanted to play that because I have been, when I first started in the Episcopal Church, I went to a parish that kind of duplicated a little bit of the orthodoxy of the use of incense. And then I've been to places where they really don't know exactly what they're doing, and then places that have a mix of high church Anglican, where they have a whole hierarchy. We're going to talk about some of that stuff, the hierarchy of swings and I really enjoyed watching that video and hearing about incense from a perspective other than the Episcopal Church. And bear with me for a minute here. I'm trying to figure out how I can see my notes at the same time that it's projected up there, and it's not quite set up here. Let's see. So project, right? So
can't see it.
You go to the very bottom.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to do it backwards here. No, I can't see it very well. Which one?
oh no, let's see. Is it used for his interview or the monitors right there?
Yes. Yes.
Yay! Got it. Thank you, everyone who helped. Okay, let's go through this. We already talked about what we want to talk about. We saw the video. All right, so as we heard in the video, incense has been around for a very long time. It's not something that we created, and in fact, it was God who instituted the use of incense. So if your church doesn't use incense, they're wrong, right? No, of course not. So thousands of years, and the first 10 verses of Exodus 30 actually talks about how to build an altar for incense. So the entire altar, the whole purpose is the use of for the use of incense to give to God. So we use incense as a sacrifice to God. Incense is an honorific. So during the service, we swing the thurible at certain things or certain people as an honor. We use incense to purify and sanctify. We see, we hear, we feel books, right? We feel the books, we hear the words, we see the beauty of the church. So why shouldn't we smell something pleasant as well? So when we bring all of our senses into the worship experience, we are that much closer to bringing our entire being into our worship to God in that time that we are together. And like he said, smell is the sense that's most closely linked to memory. You know, how many times have you walked by someplace, something caught your nose, and you were instantly transported back to like 7 years old? And that memory is as clear as could be, and it's all because of the link smell has to our memory. It's quite impressive how that can work. So, you know, we heard incense has been used in Judaism, Christianity, and as our friend in the video explained, it actually predates the Bible that we know today. The use of incense is older than the Bible itself. And Again, here we see God saying that incense shall be offered to my name. It's pretty clear that it's not something that we just came up with. So it's not just ceremonial, right? So there were some practical uses to incense. Think about where a lot of the services were held in the days that people didn't bathe every day in the hot environments. You had animals that were running around. Incense had a pretty practical use there, right? So we're going to try to cover up some of the odors and everything that, not everything, there are a lot of things in our church, right, that started out practical. Candles. Candles started out so that you could see. Well, we decided the candles were pretty, right? So we kept using them. But like everything else in the church, you have to have a reason for having them, right? We don't need them for light anymore, so now we decided to make them mean things. Incense started out as the sacrifice, then it became practical, and then we wanted to keep using it. So the good thing about incense is we've got multiple reasons for wanting to continue to use incense. A lot of the stuff that we do in the church started out for practical purposes and has turned into liturgical or theological kinds of things. Just to emphasize another point from the video, the sacrifice, the sacrifice of praise, which he mentioned, our time just being at a service or taking time in your home to stop and pray the office or the daily devotions. That is a sacrifice of your time, and that is your praise to God. The sacrifice of blood. I love the way he mentioned the bloodless sacrifice through the Eucharist that we offer every Sunday. And then, of course, incense. That's why we're here today. We continue to give that gift to Jesus. Let my prayer be set forth in thy sight as the incense. We hear that a lot, just about every Sunday night when we do evensong here, because we use incense at evensong. And that's probably one of the most commonly used opening sentences for the daily office. And if you notice in the evening prayer service, it's actually the first one that's listed. I wonder why the one about incense was the first one listed in the Book of Common Prayer for the opening sentences. And to me, it's because of that institution by God of using incense as a sacrifice. It's just something that needs to happen, right? We are people of symbolism. We love symbols. People in general, whether it's religious symbolism, whether it's patriotic symbolism, whatever, we love symbols. We like to be able to make something make sense through the use of symbols. And one way we do that with incense, we have all these different things that incense can do. And one of the most common is the prayers of the faithful, ascending up to heaven. Okay, but even the chains on the thuribles can have some symbolism. Some thuribles have 4 chains for the 4 Gospels. Some have 3 chains for the Trinity. There are single chain thuribles, and we're going to look at all those different ones here in a little bit. And I don't know what the single chain, maybe one God. But the chains don't have to have that symbolism. But this just goes to show how important symbols are to us. In the Orthodox Church, thurible may be or have gold in it. So all 3, since the frankincense that you is used, the incense, is a lot of times a blend of frankincense and myrrh. Then you have the gold, just in the act of using the thurible. We're continuing to present all three of the original gifts to Jesus on a continuing basis. So, let's talk about the rules of incense. What are the rules? Well, some places don't have any rules. Some places have a bunch of rules. And I am of the thinking that there are only a couple of actual hard-pressed rules. And one of those rules, let me make sure that that's not going to be a feedback problem. One of those rules for me is that when we're swinging, we tend to swing in multiples of three, right? I don't know how many might see that, but if we're swinging for the celebrant or the presider, they a lot of times get three sets of two, and then the next set of people get a set of three, and then a set of three. Okay, one of the main rules that I believe should remain is that the only thing that gets three sets of three is something that represents Jesus. So the gospel book, the elements on the altar, the cross, Christus Rex, crucifix. Three sets of three, and that is to honor Jesus above all else. Because let's face it, on Sundays, that's why we're there, right? We're there to honor Jesus. So the three sets of three, to me, is important to keep there. No person, no human being should get three sets of three. All the rules depend on local custom, and we're gonna turn this into a discussion here in just a little bit. We've got plenty of time today to talk. I just want to go through some stuff on the slides, and then we'll actually do the same kind of thing we did with the 301, and we're going to talk through some stuff with each other. Some of the rules can be very complex. Some of the rules can be very simple, and then anything in between. So the more complex things that tend to happen are, I mentioned the hierarchy of swinging, and this is something that generally happens in a much like high Anglo-Catholic kind of church, where you get 6 swings if you're the celebrant, and then you get like 4 swings if you're another priest, and then you get like 3 swings, and then it goes down all the way to the congregation getting 1 single swing, and then they go back to do their thing with and that's, in my personal opinion, that's just too much. Having to remember all of that kind of stuff, and then putting the congregation at whether you're vested, whether you're not vested, you're ordained, you're not ordained, you're sitting on the altar. We have a little bit of a hierarchical type of swinging here at the cathedral, but it's not like that. It doesn't. It's not 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because I would never be able to remember all of that, to tell you the truth. So the way the altar is sensed can be a very complex kind of thing, especially if it's an east-facing altar with all the candles behind it. Everything up there gets sensed in a certain way. And sensing the altar, it actually takes longer to sense an east-facing altar than it does to sense a freestanding altar, because with a freestanding altar, you basically just walk around it. With the east-facing altar, you have to sense the candles. Well, first you sense the cross, then you sense the candle, then around the front and down around, and each side gets its own thing, and by the time the Gloria is over, they're just finishing up the sensing of the altar. So it is really cool to watch. If you have not been church that has an east-facing altar that uses incense, you should go on YouTube and you should look some of that up. It is really impressive to watch how the choreography of the censing takes place, and knowing that everything that's happening has a meaning. There's a meaning to why things are censed, why it's done in that certain way. And for people who understand the reasoning, it enhances the worship service. So we're going to talk a little bit about also what not to do, or what some places say not to do. But first, let's talk about what it means to be a Thurifer. Safety. Safety is a huge deal. I have to tell you, a few weeks ago, we had a little incident here where we thought we were being safe with our hot coals. And so we've always had a small metal trash can. Actually, way back in the day, when I first started here, when things were different and we didn't have all of this new courtyard and everything, we actually had a hole in the ground with a grate on it, and we would dump our coals in the hole. You remember that, Sherry? That was a long time ago. And that way, we could just cover up the coals, and then the coals could do their thing, and we wouldn't have to worry about anything. Then we switched to having a metal trash can, where we would take the coals so we line our thermal with aluminum foil, and we would just take the tongs and bring them up, put them in the metal trash can, and let them burn out, because they were safe in the metal trash can, right? And for years and years and years, we've been doing that. And then we had some staff changes, and one of our staff, we think it was one of the staff members, we're not entirely sure how this happened, but somebody decided that right after the service, they were going to empty out the metal trash can into the regular trash can, and it was a plastic trash can, and that plastic trash can is no longer in service because it's all melted down. So we have yet again changed the way we do things. Safety is not something that just is, right? Safety has to evolve. And so now we actually have a little bucket that we put water in, and when we take a packet of coals out, we put them in the water. So hopefully that will be our final step in the evolution of our safety. But what does it mean also to be safe as a Thurifer? The Thurifer, him or herself, or themselves, is responsible 100% for the safety of the people around them, the objects around them. Don't expect people to get out of your way if you're the Thurifer. You need not hit someone else. If you are holding the thurible, you are responsible for the safety. You are responsible for not setting stuff on fire, or people, or anything else. So don't expect people to get out of your way. You need to not hit other people. When I'm a Thurifer in procession, before I start swinging, I always look and see how far away the people behind me are. Here at the cathedral, we lead the gospel in the procession. We're not at the very front of the procession. We're in the back, behind the choir, in front of the gospel. So I always look and make sure that they're far enough behind me. The smart ones know to stay back because the swinging's going to happen. But it's my responsibility as the Thurifer to not hit them with the thurible. So safety. Now, safety obviously is everyone's responsibility, but the primary person is the Thurifer themselves. We want people who are dependable, who are punctual, because, depending on your parish or your cathedral, when an acolyte, a crucifer, or torchbearer, chalice bearer, they don't show up, or they call out in the morning, hey, I don't feel good, I can't make it. You can usually run into the congregation and find someone at the last second and say, hey, can you be the crucifer today? And sure, I'll be the crucifer today. One of the, okay, what about that? So, there we go. Okay, but with a thurifer, that's not always the case. A lot of places only have 2, 3, sometimes only 1, right? Thurifer. So if the thurifer doesn't show up, it's not as easy to run out into the congregation and say, hey, can you be the thurifer today? So we want punctual people. We also want to make sure that they are knowledgeable in the liturgy, whichever liturgy they are performing that day. Because back to the first one. Okay, there we go. Okay, because there are a lot of cues, you need to be able to understand what's going on in the liturgy, when the next time the thurible is needed. When do I need to switch my coals out? When do I need to relight new coals? How long is it going to take between the peace and the offertory and all these other things that you need to understand? So being a thurifer, you need to have been an acolyte for a while, I think, before you step up as a thurifer, because you need to understand the cues throughout the service. We want to be invisible in plain sight. Okay? This is something that has been a little bit of controversy. The theatrics or not theatrics. We're not there to be seen. We're there to add to the worship experience. We're there to add to the liturgy. We're there to offer our sacrifice of incense to God. Sunday is the Lord's Day, and nothing should take the focus off of that. And so the big figure eights and the round the worlds and the helicopters and all of that inside the cathedral or the church, for me, that has always been a no-no. I don't allow that at the cathedral. As the head thurifer, we don't allow that. There are a couple of times where we do allow certain things. There are a couple of times a year that we have an outdoor procession. We've got our St. George's Day or our Palm Sunday. I'm okay with that outside. And that's great. It's celebratory. And then we have the service that on Mardi Gras on Shrove Tuesday. For that service, kind of all bets are off anyway, so go ahead and do your thing. But for a normal Sunday, when you're doing first of all, there's a safety issue. Most places aren't big enough for what the thurifers are doing. Every time I see something like that, I'm like, you're going to get hit. But if you become the spectacle with your acrobatics, thurible acrobatics, then if you become the spectacle, where's Jesus now in that moment? So I know that conversation has been had for a very long time, and I feel like the Vergers Guild has always been more on the non-theatrical side of incense and really encouraging the low-key use. If people should only notice the smoke. They shouldn't notice the person as much as the smoke. And we're going to talk about that as well in a couple of minutes here. So when we use incense during the service, so I'm going to go basically by what we do here at the cathedral, and then we'll expand on this in a few minutes here. We, at the Gloria, the cross or the crucifix here, it's a Christus Rex, gets sensed and then around the altar. And then the next time is the gospel. The deacon senses the gospel. And then in the offertory is the next time for us where we sense the altar with the elements, the altar party, and the people. And then during the Eucharist, we sense at the Sanctus and at the final doxology. At the daily office here, we have even song every Sunday night, and when we do have a Thurifer, we sense the Magnificat. So now let's get into talking about some stuff. So, is there anyone here whose parish does not use incense at all? Okay, not very many. And then using incense on maybe high holy days only. And how many use incense every Sunday? Okay, so we kind of have an equal spread through here with all of that. So, for those of you who use incense on a regular basis, what's something that might be unique about your parish? What's your local custom?
Well, we have the introit at the beginning when we go into the section, the entrance of the hymn. Then at the introit, we actually sense the altar at the beginning as part of the sanctification.
Okay. Then go ahead. Up here in the front somewhere. Okay, we got one.
Thanks. So we have a strong choral program at the cathedral, and in using the incense, it's our custom in the diocese to put the alms on the altar, and it's all sensed. But it causes issues with the timing of everything, so the musicians have had to rejigger the officery hymn and some improvisation as, depending upon how long it's taking to get the alms up. They've had to we've all had to kind of readjust how we do things. And that's not been easy, and it's not been smooth, and sometimes people forget, but whatever. Something gets sensed at some point.
We have a tendency to not like silence. And actually, one of the things that I have learned over the years is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with a little bit of silence. And if the sensing is going on and the organist isn't paying attention, most of the time here, our organist is he's incredible, and you're going to be able to hear him speak later on today. Gabriel is great. But they pay attention, and they know when to noodle a little bit and do some traveling music or whatever. But you know what? If that doesn't happen, that's fine. If you're not done sensing and the music stops, keep sensing. It's okay. Silence is okay. And the awkward feeling for us as vergers, that's understandable, because I know that a lot of people in the congregation are like, what's going on? Why is it so quiet? But it doesn't matter. Silence is okay. So I would encourage trying might not be the right word, but to just kind of go with the flow and show in your actions when you're up there as the verger and help your acolytes to understand. Just go with the flow, even if there's no music, it's okay. What else? What other local customs do we have that actually, is there anyone here who does the higher church, what I was talking about, the hierarchical swinging with the 6 swings and 4 swings and 3 swings and 2 swings? Because if there is someone here that does that, I'd love for you to explain it to me. We got up here? All right.
Hi, it's St. Thomas, Fifth Avenue in New York. It's sort of continually evolving, but in general, the celebrant is sensed with 3 double swings at every ascension of the altar. And at the offertory, celebrant gets 3 double swings, deacon gets 2 double swings, subdeacon gets a single double swing. Then the choir is sensed sort of center, left, right, and the nave is sensed center, left, right. As I said, it's continually evolving, but there's definitely a. And I couldn't speak to. I couldn't speak to the procedure that the priests do at the altar, the specifics, but I suspect your principle of 3 triple swings is reserved for the cross.
Right. Okay.
And incidentally, if you wanted to see an east-facing church that does a lot of altar sensing, St. Thomas, all of our services are on YouTube, so please use it
St.
as
Thomas,
an education.
so with the huge mural right in the
Ferreros,
yeah. Is Kevin Klein still? Kevin Klein, is he still the organist there?
No.
No. Yeah, I think he was there for a while. Let's see, who else wants to talk about their procedure at their parish?
Oh, hi. We use a reserved 3 triple swings for the sacrament. And that's the only time we use the 3 triple swings. The presider gets 3 double swings, and me, the deacon, gets 1 or 2. And then the preacher, before we go to the deacon, the preacher is another clergy that's at the altar. I go and sends them 2 double swings, and then I'm the last one to be done there before it goes to the single swing with the subdeacon, MC, and the rest of the acolyte parties and the choir. So for us, I think that's the way. I know it sounds like it's the way we've always done it, but that seems to be the tradition all the time I've been there. So I don't know what everybody does. It's pretty much like St. Thomas and Fifth Avenue, but that's how we live it to make it conform to with every Sunday that we do.
Thank you. And then here is.
This is on a different topic. The Thurifer in our church generally comes from the senior crucifer acolyte, and it's an honor to be asked to be trained to do that. So it's something that the young kids or seniors in high school who have been serving as a senior crucifer, and if they want to be trained as a Thurifer, they serve as a Thurifer. So all our Thurifers are young teens.
Nice. I like that. So, we do not use this one. This thurible was actually blessed by one of our late priests who was here many moons ago. But this is an example of the Orthodox, and it does have 12 bells. There are 3 on each of the 4 chains. So I guess we need to know the priest is okay, so we can hear them. That's what he was saying, right? Was the rope was so you could hear, make sure the priest was okay. It's a little smaller. I don't know if this is typical in an Orthodox church or not. I really don't. But it's smaller, but I like it because it has the bells, and it gives me an opportunity to show you in real time instead of just on a video that they really do exist. And I kind of wish we would use this in the Episcopal Church. I think it's kind of neat to have that. But there's also the single chain. Is there anyone here who uses single chain? Yeah, okay. I started with a single chain. This is all wrapped up. This belongs to one of our this is the personally owned thurible, and I didn't want to unwrap it because it's incredibly wrapped with tape and everything, and I just didn't want to take the time to have to put it all back together. I think generally we use this type of a motion with a single chain instead of trying to do it just one-handed, because there's no disc up here, and it makes me a little nervous when I'm using a single chain to try to do it one-handed. So everything I do is pretty much short chain swinging with a single. What's your for those of you who have single chains? What's your general technique? Is it one-handed, or do you hold it more like this? More like this? Yeah.
I do it all.
With the like this with the.
But then when we have some I'll shorten it. That's right. I do it the wrong way. I like it better when we go down the aisle. But then when we have a funeral and need to cast it, I'll just shorten it.
There you go.
There's no point. It's not going to go on when you have a casket following. But I'll do it wrong way. When we go have the session, we do the system. Okay. That's where I take the place.
Nice. I like your technique. I was having a conversation last night about using the thurible, and I made the comment that I've been here at the cathedral for 26 years now, and probably 24 or more of those I've been the head Thurifer. And over the years, I can pretty much, I made the comment that I could look at someone and know almost immediately whether they were going to be able to get it or not, whether they were going to be able to swing the thurible or not, because it's just kind of a thing. You either feel it or you don't. And what was it that you said? That I sounded like a what?
Like a talent agent.
Yeah. You said, but literally, I've had people who really wanted to be a Thurifer. I mean, like they wanted it so bad, and they would take they would pick the thurible up and when you try to explain, no, but it'd be an extension of yourself, and you show them, they still just can't. They either swing it too high, or they have to put their whole body into it, or whatever, and it's hard to explain how to do this. You either feel it or you don't. It's just an extension of yourself. That's all it is. So our main ways here at the cathedral, we either have our long chain swinging or short chain. One thing that I don't want our Thurifers to do is to ring the chains. That's something only the celebrant should be doing when they're sensing the cross. That's the only time that should happen. A Thurifer should be quiet, should be silent when they're doing their swinging. So the two thuribles that we use are this one, the silver. This one is a standard Almi, heavily overpriced, lightweight thurible. It has a copper bowl insert, and like I said, we line ours with foil. So So this is the main one. This is actually my least favorite one to use. I don't like using the silver one. I really enjoy using the brass thurible. And the reason is because this one is much heavier. And I feel like I have much more control with the heavier thurible. But some of the clergy don't like it because it's heavy. I like it because it's heavy. I just feel like there's so much more control. It's less likely to arc up above the chain and cause that terrible sound or the coals spewing everywhere. This one does not have an inner bowl. So we have to make sure that we line this one really well with the foil, otherwise it gets all the resin and everything that's in there. One thing that I suggest for any thurible is that if you have this middle chain, try not to let your thurible close all the way, ever. And the reason I say that is because I can't tell you how many times this one especially, this one doesn't tend to close all the way, but the silver one especially, every once in a while, it'll get the resin around the ring, and once you put the coals in there and everything heats up, that resin heats up just enough to become adhesive, and then it's time to fill your thurible, and you just pull on the chain and nothing happens. It's like, oh no, it's all stuck. So you have to put it down on the ground and hold it with your feet, and you look like you're trying to start a chainsaw or something. If you keep this middle chain looped and try to keep it open, you won't have that problem. And you also get better smoke flow. So for those of you who like lots and lots and lots of smoke, how do you get that smoke? How do you, what's your technique for getting billows and billows and billows? Because personally, I think if you can see the altar, you're not going to.
So we're at St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle. I always train people to use more coals than you would want, because if you overfill a coal with too much incense, then it's going to smother it. And one of the services we do, which is really unique to us, we do on the first Sunday of Advent every year, we do a service that's a play on lessons and carols. It's called O Antiphons. And it meditates on the 7 prophesied names of the Messiah, and it features an incense bowl that is placed on a plinth right in front of the altar, and 7 times we offer incense before the collect is offered for said, antiphon. And that we use actually, I think, 9 coals in this bowl. They're placed on ground pumice. And so each coal gets a pretty nice lump of incense, which it's a lot of smoke. If you like a lot of smoke, you'll have to join us for that sometime.
Our trick for lots of smoke doesn't mean you need to change your charcoal more often, but we break the charcoal up so there's more surface area that gets contact with the incense by breaking the charcoal even before you light it. So I can put 2 briquettes in there, and we use a single that you've got wrapped up there. But with 2 briquettes and broken up into pieces, I can get a cloud. But before the gospel, I'm going to have to go change the charcoal in.
I was reading on, I want to say it was, it might have been the website for the place that we use, the monastery that we use for the incense. They actually recommend not scraping the gray off of the charcoals, because you actually want a little bit of a cooler burn. And you still want it hot, but you want it that cooler burn so that the incense doesn't just, we have, every once in a while we have a problem with the incense where it's way too hot, it starts smelling like, burnt sap instead of, the actual nice fragrance of the incense, so we have to be careful with that. One of the things that I like to do, and this usually only works for the second half of the service, because in the first half of the service, so we start with 3 coals. So for a general Sunday service, we're going to use 6 coals total. And for the first part, we have our first 3 in there. The one thing that I cannot get certain people to do is to sprinkle the incense over the coals. But they'll take it and they'll just dump 3 big scoops of incense right in the middle, and that doesn't do much good, because and so you get these little pitiful little things of smoke come out of the throat. Sprinkle and around the edges, actually, of the charcoal works for us really well. In the second part of the service, I like to take the coals that are burned down, and they're actually pretty small now at this point, but we've got a little foil kind of thing here that we set down. And I like to take those 3 burnt coals from the beginning and put them in here, kind of scrape them off a little bit to get the burnt incense off of them. But then I put those 3 burnt ones, they're still hot. And even though they may not be completely hot, what happens is when you put them down, when you put them back in the bottom, and then you put fresh coals on top of those, in kind of a little lattice kind of thing, then you have all this air underneath the main coals that are burning down. So if you sprinkle that incense and you let some of it be on top of the coals, but some of it gets underneath the coals, you can get some pretty magnificent smoke that way, because you've got the other thing that Lisa likes to do is take the aluminum foil that we used to and ball it up and then uncrinkle it so that you've got that textured surface on the bottom. And that also gives you little pockets of air, because remember, what does fire need? It needs the 3 things. One of those things is air. So you need that circulation, you need that airflow. So if you want to make sure the Thurifer doesn't see the shadow, then you can find where you can get any extra air in there, and that's really going to help out with the smoke. So did you have something? Okay. Let me ask this: is either lots of smoke or not a lot of smoke? Lots of smoke. Not a lot of smoke. There are a couple of times in our service that we want to reduce the amount of smoke. The gospel was one of them. We have one deacon in particular that she is a little sensitive to the smoke. I always tell people, if you cough when the incense comes by, it's not because you're actually sensitive to the incense, it's because you're scared of it and you won't inhale deeply. Actually, if you breathe normally when the incense comes by, there's less likely chance that you're going to start coughing, because when you try to not inhale it because, oh, it's incense, then when you take those little short breaths, that's when it gets stuck in the back of your throat, and that's what causes you to cough. So just breathe. I literally have taken a cold thermal down the aisle, no smoke, no coals, nothing, and had people cough like crazy. Psychosomatic. I literally have done that, not on purpose. It happened one time at a wedding where the aluminum foil got caught. It was resin. It was another resin problem. When I pulled the chain up, everything got dumped out. I went, oh, well, that's not good. Didn't have time to put it back in, so they wanted the show. If it had been a regular service, I just wouldn't have carried the incense in. But so I carried an empty thermal down the aisle at a wedding. This was 20-something years ago. People just coughed like it was crazy.
How do you overcome that? My former parish used to use incense occasionally. When the bishop would come, he would bring incense. And he always said he had hypoallergenic incense. But we've encountered exactly that thing. And if incense were used, people would complain to the priest, I can't come to church anymore. And then the priest would cave and then the incense would be gone. What a loss. How do you get over that resistance?
Well, first of all incense is hypoallergenic incense. People are not allergic to incense. Now, granted, there are people who may have asthma or other respiratory.
I have asthma. I love incense.
Right, and I was going to say, I know a lot of people who do have asthma that have no problem with the incense. And how do you overcome it? Unfortunately, there are always going to be those that I don't know the answer to that question. We had a point in time where someone actually wanted to try to bring legal action because we used incense, and even from when the choristers and the girls' choirs were singing and believed that there was something like health-wise wrong with that, and there's no evidence whatsoever that incense has adverse health. There's no evidence that it does or it doesn't actually. The answer to that question that's a tough one, because how do you overcome it? Well, people have already made up their minds. I think we have some of them.
Yeah, so at our church we have 2 services on Sunday morning. We use incense at our high 11 o'clock, right one service, bells, smells, some Eucharist. Our 8:45 is broad church. We don't use it, so people have a choice. We use it at evensong. We had a woman complain. She says, I can't go to an evensong that doesn't have incense. And so he said, okay, we'll not have incense. We waited for 3 months. She never showed up for evensong, so we have it back. And people don't complain. They complain when we took it away.
Right.
So.
Well, if you're going to evensong, you probably like that kind of thing anyway.
At our parish, we have a pillar of the church who has COPD and reacts violently every time incense is used, usually on high holy occasions. However, the priest and I have worked out a plan. This same man volunteers one Sunday a month to go into the basement of the church to cook a Sunday breakfast. And since he's not in the congregation, he's downstairs, and the smell of bacon is wafting up into the sanctuary and making people hungry. We're going to try to introduce incense when we have to our service to cover up the smell of bacon. And that way get the parish used to it.
Right. Bacon incense.
I was just gonna say, one of the reasons we have low smoke, especially the choir singing something significant, is because when you breathe it in, it can dry out your vocal cords, and so that's an issue. It's not a health problem, it's just you're just drying out your vocal cords, and trying to sing with that can be difficult. The other thing, you haven't talked about it, but I would say fire prevention, one thing we make sure every verger, every usher, every lector knows where the fire extinguishers are, and fire blankets if you have them, so,
Right.
yeah.
There's always this little bit of between the choir and the verger, right? It's like, let's see how many choir members we can make off today.
Sort of a fun anecdotal story. I was in Exeter Cathedral summer of 19, and I had a tour of their attic space, a part of the roof tour, and the head verger mentioned they had a requiem service to another one of his sub-vergers. Hey, go turn off the fire detection. We've just changed which incense we were using, and we haven't calibrated the smoke detectors to that flavor of incense yet, because shortly after Windsor Castle burned, they said, oh, risk. And they have these little sniffers that are in the domes of all of their archways that are picking up and sampling the air at a crazy low parts per million, and the incense was enough to trigger that and call out the fire brigade.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah, we have to be careful if we're going to try to do incense in any place other than the cathedral itself. So one more, and then it's about time to wrap up.
I just wanted to share something because we did it at a conference one year, so I have to stand up and demonstrate this thing to you. So I had to finally, before liturgy started, I finally had to go up to the congregation. I'm already vested, and I'm going to say that we're going to have incense today, so don't worry about if the fire alarm goes off, because the fire department's notified that if it goes, just ignore it. But then I started doing the airline mode. I said, for the fire escape purposes, the exits are back that way, and that way, and that way, and stuff like this. So you have to evacuate. That is where it is. So just just be aware. And so we all laughed, and then we started liturgy. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I had the distinct pleasure last year of overhauling our incense in my parish, and we used to use all the English stuff like Chabon, and we still use Rivaux and stuff like that. We have the silica, we got rid of that, and we started shopping around for American incense. So we started using the stuff from Order Holy Cross, and people are a lot happier with that because it's a different kind of incense, and the charcoal burning system has changed so much, and it really kind of helped them. People are a lot happier with the thing, instead of being all overly stuffed with the incense that we used to use. And the choir for us is in the back of the church, the choir loft, and so we take care of them by opening all the windows, and it still works. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so a couple of minutes before noon here, I brought up our accoutrement. So if anyone wants to take a look at what I have up here, feel free to do that. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, or anything like that, feel free to let me know. I know we're about to take our break here, so we're going to wrap up this session because it is time to wrap up, and I don't want to keep anyone too long. So I hope you learned something new, and I certainly enjoyed being able to talk to you and hear from you. So thank you.